I'll run Thomas. I keep threatening to run Thomas. That boy needs to be in politics, man, I'm telling you. I keep telling you. Yeah, yeah. He'll be 23.
I call this meeting of the Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District to order, that the record show that a quorum of board members is present, that this meeting has been duly called, and that notice of this meeting has been posted in accordance with Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551. Good evening to everyone. Welcome to our work session. Tonight, the Board of Trustees is meeting in a called work session board meeting. The board welcomes and appreciates comments and input from the community. Open forum is provided at each meeting to allow the public to address the board. There will be 2 open forums tonight. Open forum number 1 is to hear requests regarding agenda items only. Open forum number 2 is to hear requests or make comments regarding non-agenda items and will be heard at the end of the meeting. Those addressing the board are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes per meeting. The speaker should identify his or her name, group affiliation if any, and make a brief presentation with an identified solution if one is sought. Remarks should be addressed to the board as a whole. Oral presentations may not include charges against any employee or board member by name. It is my responsibility to determine if the person addressing the board has attempted to resolve a concern informally or through the district's complaint policies. If not, the speaker will be directed to follow the appropriate policy. The board requests that all presentations be made in a courteous, respectful, and professional manner, and asks that speakers monitor their own behavior. If you wish to speak during one of the open forums, please fill out one of the cards located on the table in the entry hall. Dr. Harrington, any comments?
The only comment is, again, a reminder, Friday, we have the employee banquet. So we're all excited about that, and we'll all be out there then. So that was the only comment I had today.
Okay, no clarifications?
No, sir.
Okay, open forum number 1? Nothing? All right, so at this time, we'll adjourn into closed session. Pursuant to Texas Open Meetings Act, Texas Government Code, Chapter 551, the board will adjourn into closed session pursuant to sections 551.071 to 551.074.
because I called.
All right, the board is reconvening into open session. Reports and presentations. Does anybody have questions on disbursements for the month of March 2023? All right, 6.02, District Benchmark Assessments, DBA. Dr. Norgard.
Good evening. I am coming to you tonight with some junior high math data. This is, of course, interim data that's related to our meets and master's grade level on STAR performance that we are working towards. Little context before we dive right into the numbers, just reminding you, I didn't bring the examples this time because you've already seen a math DBA report in the fall, but if you'll remember those 10 new item types, lots and lots involved in these new item types. When we look at the historical trend data in the 2021 school year, we had separated out our OLO and our traditional, so only traditional are included in the trend data. And when we get into math, especially once we start into junior high, the cohort data is not completely clean, cut and dry, because that's when our students start mixing between advanced academics and on-level, and different grade levels go into the same pot, where in other grades they were together, now they're separate, so the cohort data is not represented in the same way. So here's our 7th grade data. I'm so excited that one more year and that blank row will just roll on off, but I leave it there as a reminder of where we were, because I've always brought to you 4 years worth of data. So we see some slight drops. They're small red arrows. Okay, technically they're all the same size, but the numbers in them are small. For some adjustments, when you consider the difference in this test with equation editor and this multi-select, this was actually, I would say, probably about expected for us and what we thought we might see in looking at some of these numbers. These are the goals that were based on last year's 7th graders and how they performed. So we are still working towards those goals, because as you can see, we do get some growth. Math, not as much at approaches, but generally at meets and masters, we tend to get a little more growth. So we have some growth to make. Having this data is now allowing our teachers to look not just at the content, but are there particular item types that they seem to be struggling with? You know, the multi-select or the equation editor. I really didn't get quite the right symbol. I had the right numbers, but I didn't have the right symbols in between them. So teachers are really taking this time to dig into the data with their students and provide those appropriate feedbacks and interventions. Lots of data on this group of students other than their 4th grade year. And so if you can see, remember up through elementary, up through grade 6, we're seeing 2 DBAs. DBA 1 is that partial DBA, where we would usually see then DBA 2 when they have that first full spring, full-length DBA. So really, this year students, they're performing very similarly to how they did at this point in their 6th grade year. So we then see the growth that this group of students achieved from their DBA to their STAR last year. So we know that they're capable of stretching and growing from their DBA to their STAR performance. In 8th grade.
Is that timing about the same?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Mm-hmm. We do have just about the same number of weeks. TEA adjusted the STAR calendar at the last minute on us. And I say last minute, I mean we were already well into a new year. So, but we have roughly the same amount. 8th grade, this is important to remember because it can be a little striking to see that suddenly the master's is single digits. Remember, in 8th grade, only the on-level students are in this data. In 7th grade, you had both on-level and advanced academics. Our 8th grade advanced academic students are in algebra, so they were pulled out of this data set, and my heart always feels the need to remind you, honestly, if that master's number gets too big, it means we missed some kids that we should have pushed to algebra, so I'm okay. I want you to be okay with that too.
Okay with the other numbers, the approaches and meets?
Nope. But the same thing, when you think about those new item types, this is the intervention. This is honestly not as surprising. I was very pleased that those 7th grade dips were small, because to me that I think really is we've got the content solid and we can just tweak the item types. This, our teachers are digging a little more into. Is it the content? Is it the item type? Some of both. Some of both, but we actually did see a gain at masters. So So here are our goals, because we've generally had really strong performance. Those are set on last year's 8th graders. So that is what we are striving for at the end of the year. And you can see last year, different group of students, but they made some really big gains at masters last year between their DBA and STAR. So a lot of times it is, when you think about those thresholds, it's the difference of one question. You know, we're putting them into these categories, but within the categories, there's a whole spectrum of where they're performing, and the way that we're looking at it, you can't tell necessarily, are they clustered just right almost there, or we can talk about hoppers or droppers, which way across the thresholds are they bouncing. So our 8th grade teachers historically have great results. We know they know how to dig into this data and support those kids. So that is what they are very busy doing right now. Again, just setting the context again, as we enter algebra, we are combining the grades. That's how they come across when we look at our district targets and our performance objectives reports, et cetera. So of course the teachers are looking at those differently depending on, is this an advanced academics class or on level? But for the district level data I'm bringing to you, we will look at that group together. And I just remind you again that the cohort, you're not going to see cohort data here because two paths diverged in the woods. So our combined performance, here's where you can see just in one spot that we do see really nice, strong performance from our advanced academics. And actually, that is strong performance from 9th grade. When you look at state data, that is strong performance. But it's this combined here at the bottom, that's where we're tracking, because that's what our goals are set on, which disappeared. There used to be little stars there with our goals. They'll come up right here. Here they are. So we had very large gains last year in algebra. Once you get into the 90s, you don't get very large gains, but you see we are continuing to tweak and ramp up that positive. To me, this is part of what maybe speaks to the item types of maturity and exposure. So we're going to continue to give them all of those opportunities. Historically, approaches changes very little. Based on where the thresholds are set, but we get a little more leverage on meets and masters between the DBA and STAR. Our instructional focus in secondary mathematics, building thinking classrooms, you'll hear me say frequently when I come back to you next week with some science and social studies, I'll really be talking about it's the thinking. That's what these new item types are getting to. I'm not just saying C or J or whatever. I have to justify, I have to explain, I have to be able to convince someone else why I knew the right thing. And so this has been an ongoing book study and classroom practice that we are seeing, and I love going into math classrooms now, and we're seeing these, it's not just, you know, here's the one board at the front of the room. Our math coordinator purchased these individual small whiteboards that could be throughout the room so that students are constantly, I'm not just working on my paper, I'm working where everybody can see, I see each other. Wow, that's really interesting that you did that. What made you approach it that way? And really having those kinds of discussions that push the thinking that they need to be able to demonstrate with these new item types. So questions about our junior high math? Yes, sir.
So Holly, I tend to look at things kind of weird anyway. Going back to the 8th grade math, I'm looking at odd number years, even number years. And if I was looking at them just individually, I'd say, wow, a little bit of growth there, a little bit of growth here. But put together, it looks like a yo-yo, kind of back and forth, back and forth.
This one?
I'm in slide 8. Go back. Yes.
This
right
one?
there. Yeah.
Okay, the other thing to remember too is different groups of students.
Right.
So that's why I try to bring you both data, but math, the cohorts get just a little messy once we reach this point. So we had students coming in. What's interesting is all the other 7th and algebra, that 1920 was blank. 8th grade did get a DBA that year. And notice the date of it, March 3rd, so the week before spring break.
Right.
And then we shut down. If you remember in the history, 8th grade has also been tied to SSI, the Student Success Initiative, where they would take it multiple times.
Right.
And so 8th grade was given earlier. And so this was an adjustment in our scope and sequence. For one thing, instead of pushing students to, you need to be all the way through 8th grade math curriculum by the beginning of April, so you could take this first administration, it moved the test back as we're, coming into online and traditional learning mixed up from students that didn't take a STAR exam the previous year. So we saw those big drops. So we had a lot of runway to gain
Okay.
the next year. So those were some really high jumps, and you're right, so now falling back. So stabilizing may really be somewhere in between the two. It just, there were a lot of students that had different experiences coming in based on where they were when that gap happened for
Right.
them.
I'm just real pleased to see that the algebra seems to be consistently going up, but this looks like it's kind of
Yep,
riding a
people
roller
ask us
coaster.
all the time how we
Okay.
keep getting algebra up there, and we just keep doing it.
Very good.
Anything else?
So, I'm just trying to figure out scale of things, but, from what I can tell, is it about, a third of the kids go into algebra in 8th grade?
Roughly.
Okay,
Roughly a third. We may have different representations at different campuses.
so that's why you would see, you'd expect to see a pretty big difference between 7th grade scores and 8th grade scores.
Yeah, that's why it's
on level.
hard. At one point in time, I tried to track the cohort, and then I'd just say, but this will change. And I was like, it's really not an appropriate line to draw. It's just
Yeah, I
too
just
hard
wanted
to
to see
tease
if I
out
was
that
reading that
difference.
right.
Okay,
All right, any other questions? All right, thank you.
thank you.
Next, we'll look at special education update. Ms. Reek.
Thanks. So I just wanted to come to you, I'll use the microphone, that'll be better, with a quick update on special education, and this has kind of been following up with some of the work you've been doing with Lydia. So as you know, we've talked previously about our increase in identification, and when Dr. Harrington came in, he kept saying, well, when's the funding gonna follow? So I thought, well, let's look at that, and let's look at it closer, because I'm a data person, and data does help us, right? So just a little bit about where we are. These are our percentages of our most common eligibilities. We do have 13 categories in special education, but the most common. And so you can see specific learning disability is our highest, with speech only and autism next.
What is specific learning disability? Is that the dyslexia?
So dyslexia is one type of specific learning disability, but a student that has a specific learning disability has intelligence in the average range, and in some areas, and shows strengths and weaknesses in their IQ, and then they have a deficit in one area, and that area can be math. It can be math calculations, problem solving, it can be dyslexia, it can be reading comprehension, it can be written expression, it can also be oral language. Okay, very good question. Okay, oops, I think I kind of go back. One, there we go. Okay, and then instructional arrangements. This is one thing Lydia suggested I share with you, and it's very interesting. If you look at the percentages of students that are pulled out of general education, you can see that 15%, 20%, 24%, the 8%, all of those students are in general education most of the day. More than 50% of our students spend the majority of their time in general education. So I went 7 years back for a specific reason. In 2016, there was a very big series of articles in the Houston Chronicle saying that the state of Texas has failed their special education students. It is true that we had an 8.5% threshold that TEA required for us to meet in identification. So since that time, the federal government has been working with TEA closely. And so we have increased drastically in that time period. So the big thing I want you to see at the bottom is we have a 48% increase in students with IEPs in the past 7 years. So that's been the impact to HEB ISD. This is my planning amount. So the basic allotment I receive in the summer of federal funding through IDA, and we have had a 9% increase in federal funding in the last 7 years.
Renee, is there one particular area that's growing faster than the rest?
It's pretty consistent across the board. We do have a lot of 3- and 4-year-olds. Our FOSSI numbers, so those are students who have intellectual disabilities, are in a self-contained program, that number has jumped up significantly. But across the board, our students with learning disabilities has gone up. It's pretty consistent everywhere.
So for those of you that have not done any advocating on the federal level, when she says that the increase in federal funding is to 9%, or a 9% increase, it's important for us to remember that IDEA should be, or it was promised by the legislature, federal legislature, to be funded at 50%. It's never been funded at 50%. So, and that's 50% of the total cost for a special education student. So when we know that they're only funding it, I believe it's 20% of the 50%, they're woefully underfunding special ed. So an increase, great, but it's still not even to where they should be at 50%.
Right, absolutely. But in HEB, we're still performing extremely well. So this is a comparison of our STAR scores from 2021 to 2022. We did go down just a smidge in ELA, EOC, but that's not the best news. This is the best news. We're beating all of our counterparts. So, and this, I attribute this not just to our special education program, but also our general education program, because we could not make this type of progress without our general education teachers. Oh, that's, sorry, Pearland, ISD, and then, so yeah, Birdville, Northwest, yep. Yeah, so Katy, we chase Katy quite a bit, but we're hanging in there with them. And they do, we've visited Katy. I know what they do instructionally, and it is strong. All right.
But we are strong.
We are strong. We are strong.
Renee, I have a question.
Sure.
I figured out we have about 100 emotionally disturbed students. Are any of those in the general ed program?
Absolutely.
And how many are not in the general ed program of about those 100?
Oh.
I know at Trinity we had them self-contained.
Yes. I would have to run those numbers, but
Are you
we have
getting-
increased our number in that area. We've added which you guys have approved. We've added 2 PACES classes at the elementary level, so all of those students.
Is there anything else you need in this day and time to help with those students?
I mean,
Do you have
behavior
enough teachers?
specialists.
Do you have enough specialists? Can we take care of those kids?
Behavior specialists are always very helpful. The biggest problem we've had this year is maintaining teachers. And the number one place they're going to leave is that classroom.
Yes.
Right there. So that's, we have a hard time keeping staff
Okay.
in those classrooms because it's very challenging.
Yes, I know.
As you know firsthand.
Renee, in the last 2 years, so how many additional positions has the board already approved?
The board has already approved 70 positions just in the last 2 school years for special education.
Because of that increase from 8 to 13.
Yeah, and we're still, I haven't even been able to scratch the surface at secondary. Well, we're just gonna keep plugging away. Elementary is, we're close. We're in much better position than we've ever been. And Dr. Harrington and the school board has been very supportive.
Any other questions? Thank you, Ms. Reek.
All right, thank you.
All right, now we're going to get an update on the Doc Nav Laserfish from Mr. Kerbo.
Good evening. We have an item from the February board meeting we need to clarify for you. As it was presented, there was an error in some of the presentation information. Just wanted to make a clarification so that you have the proper understanding of what was presented and what was approved and what we'll be purchasing. Item 1010 on that agenda was for the purchase of district-wide document management system. The purchase was awarded to DocuNav is the vendor, and Laserfish was the product. So there are a number of resellers that sell Laserfish as a document management system, and DocuNav is one of those. We had 8 proposals received. 2 did not meet the specifications, and we eliminated those from consideration immediately. So that left 6. Another 5 resellers offered the Laserfish product. So we were basically comparing equivalent bids from one to another. So as we got through, or as we presented it, the item in the agenda said that this purchase would be for 330 users, and that's not correct. What is correct is as we began looking at this as a solution, we initially projected it for 60 users. During the question and answer portion of the procurement process, we requested additional pricing for up to 330 users so that we could add additional licenses as needed and know what that cost would be so that we'd be able to plan appropriately. What was tabulated and presented was for 60 users for all vendors, and that was the tabulated cost. I think it was a little over $305,000 total. So that's what we wanted to clarify for you, and I apologize for that error as it was presented, but just know purchasing it this way, though, will allow us to avoid wasting licenses that we won't be needing in the first implementation. So there'll be a group of about 60 users to begin using this as the phase 1 of this implementation is carried out, and then as we roll it out to additional campuses and departments, and then we can add additional licenses at the prices that were proposed in future years.
So quick question, Gary, is that simultaneous users or just users, period?
It'll be simultaneous users. Yeah.
All right, thank you for that update, Mr. Kerbo. Any questions?
Thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, 7.01, financial statements for the month of February 2023. Mr. Williams.
Okay, good evening. You have presented before you the financial statements that ended February 28th, 2023 that we will go over. General fund, we had a fund balance of $247,955,630. That represents revenues over expenditures of $86,328,265. Investment interest increased year to date in the amount of $2.301,539 as compared to $119,227 collected as of the end of February last year. That's not for the month. That's just total collected up to that date. Total expenditures as of 2/28 were at 47.33, and of course that is below our where we're at right now, half a year of 50%. So its fund is doing well, performing as expected. The next report is the Wrestler report. On that report, you'll see that payroll, our number one expense, was, as of the end of February, was $82,968,889. That's 85%, but as you all know, that will, by the end of the year, that will creep up to 88%, which is where we end up just about every year. Utilities, the number two expense, at 2% was $1,897,860. Instructional supplies, the third highest expense, was at $1,407,133, and that was 1%. The Child Nutrition Fund balance of $10,104,202. That represents revenues over expenditures of $1,697,224. The department continues to operate very well, but as we say every month, like a broken record, they're still short-staffed, but Mariella still does a great job, and she's actually here tonight. So, their total expenditures as of the end of February were at 30.57%. So you can kind of see those low employment numbers reflected in that percentage there. as at this time of the year, 50% would be more normal. The CNS budget is performing as expected very well. Great job, Mariella. The debt service fund, of course, they continue to increase as tax collections increase. Increased investment interest here, I need to make a correction. That's transposed number from the general fund. It is not 2.301 million. It is actually 541,593. Still a big improvement over what it was last year in the amount of $9,181. I wish it was $2.3 million, but fortunately it's not. Of course, first debt service payment's been made. The second one will be made in August. And then only thing I've really added here is we're starting to identify some of the bonds that we can defease. And what we will try to do is do that as close to the end of August as we can, the end of our fiscal year, because we want to hang on to that $5 million that's earning about 3.5%, 4% interest as long as we can. So, pre-K, CK, fund balance of $405,710. That's revenues over expenditures in the amount of $320,288. We've received 84.14% of that budgeted revenue as of the end of February. Total expenditures are at 46.77%. Program is doing as expected. Special revenue funds, again, these are all our federal funds, state program funds. Total expenditures are at 34.48, and then the overall expenditures do exceed revenues due to a lag in TEA draws, which is fairly normal because we spend it first and then get reimbursed for that. So, but those funds are tracking as expected. Campus Activity Fund, $3,695,614 fund balance. That's revenue over expenditures in the amount of $921,877. Those funds are doing as expected, and those kiddos raising that money, but they're also starting to spend it, especially this time of year. 2018 bond fund, that represents fund balance of $18,848,465. That is expenditures exceed revenues, because as you know, we haven't got any bonds to sell, so there are no, other than interest revenue, which is better for this fund too, that we don't have any new revenue coming into this account. As you know, right now we're using those remaining bond funds to pay for the expenses of the Bel Air project. And then when we exhaust those, we will move over to the locally defined capital improvement fund to pay for the remainder of Bel Air. The possible bond, Series 2024, I'm calling it Series 2024 because that's likely when we would sell those bonds. Depending on if we have a November election. This is a fund we're just using to track what we spent on this bond proposal up to this date. The expenditures, of course, do exceed the revenues in the amount of $407,482 total. And same thing, no revenues for this fund yet, other than some interest revenue. Or there's no revenues period for this fund, excuse me. And then the accumulated expenditures, these can be charged back to the bond once the bond election passes. Locally defined capital projects fund, again, revenues or expenditures exceed revenue in the amount of $1,237,094 because the only time we put money in this fund is when the board elects to move funds into the locally defined project fund. These funds are, like I say, will be used for the remaining expenditures of Bel Air Elementary once our 2018 bond funds are exhausted. The new projects that were discussed at the October facilities meetings, and some of those are coming up on the agenda tonight. So I also wanted to do a little bit of an update on this fund. So you should have, let me get my glasses, because it's tiny writing. These are our locally defined projects. This is the funds, and basically, if you'll just jump down to the bottom right corner, you'll see a number that's kind of pink outlined in red. That's 22,974,287. That is the amount of money in that fund that is not earmarked up above for some project. So you can see that Oakwood Terrace was a project, elementary, you can see the 26 million that's earmarked for the other half of Bel Air. You can see that we set aside $1 million apiece for the concession facilities, buildings that we're gonna be coming up and talking about that here in a later agenda item. Admin parking lot, transition center repurpose. And then, of course, we've got and down there in green, you'll see a BCTEA FF&E. This is money that was basically left over from the 2014 bond, I believe, 11, that has just been sitting in this, basically been held in this account for future use for CTE, but we're now going to use that for putting in the welding program and all that over at the viewing. So, I say all that to say, if you get your pencil out and start adding up on these bond agenda items coming up, on the agenda is a possibility of approving $11.258 million, of which a big piece of that is additional monies, depending on what the board decides on the baseball, softball project, because as I said, $4 million of it is budgeted up there already, but it's going to be a little bit more than that. And then another big chunk will be the possible real estate purchase that the board has talked about. So, in other words, if we approve everything tonight, there's still going to be in excess of 14 million or so left in that fund. So when we always like to keep a $10 million balance. So what we're doing is we're using this fund as we do projects and approve them, we're going to put them on here, and then we'll come back at some point. We'll ask the board to move money from our fund balance accounts and replenish this fund so we can use this like an operating fund, if that makes sense. Does all that make sense to you? Okay. And that's all I have.
Any questions on the financial statements? All right, budget transfer and amendment requests.
Scroll down. Oops. Too far. There we go, right there. Before you've got the monthly budget transfer requests. These are fairly routine amendment transfers, not really that big for the size of our budget, actually. Most of these are travel related, it appears to be. Any questions on that?
Any questions on budget transfers and amendments? Give me 1 second.
And I'll go ahead and tell you, the next report coming up is the investment report.
Any questions on the investment report?
All right, that's all I've got for now.
All right, so we got a list of meetings or items to review for the regular board meeting. Contracted therapy services for special education. I know the board has received a lot of information, or has received information on these items, so just let me know if there's any questions as we go down the list. Any questions on 7.04? All right, 7.05, laptop computers and Chromebooks. Any questions on that purchase? 7.06, elementary teacher iPad replacement. Any questions on that?
What's the difference between an
So an Apple Pencil is the tool that you use to write on the iPad, similar to a stylus. So our intent with the iPads for our classroom teachers is that it would enhance their mobility in the classroom and allow them to work untethered, so they can hold their iPad and their pencil and be working, for example, a math problem that will show up on their interactive flat panel or projector. The students can watch what the teacher writes. Students can hand the device to the student and allow the student to write, and it will show up on the screen for all students to see. But they don't have to do it standing at the board.
Okay, they're $89?
That is correct.
Okay, if I'm a teacher and I lose mine, what happens?
We will have extra on hand, but we will highly encourage them to label it. Lots of our teachers use like what?
The people are laughing have been in the classroom.
Oh,
And, you know, there are students that like to take things, and there are teachers that forget where things are. So I was wondering what happens when they end up missing. So that was my question.
and right now our teachers have crayons that go with their iPads, so it's a similar situation. The Apple Pencil is just easier for them to write with.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Erase once, but they have to pay for it the second time.
That's what I said. I expected that answer right away. Well, they pay for it, but things happen.
Any questions on the iPad replacements? Any further questions? All right, 7.07, electronic visitor management system. Any questions on that purchase? 7.08, welding booths and air filtration systems.
I do have a question. What's the time, I mean, how soon is that will be done, and how soon are we buying them, and how soon can kids take classes? You know, all of a sudden I'm seeing we're buying equipment, which I'm excited about. Should have been done when we built the building, but is it going to be ready for this coming year?
Yes, that's the plan. Right now, one of the items you've got on your agenda to approve is the job order contract,
Yeah, I
the
saw
first
that.
job order contract for the electrical power. That's step one. Actually, step one was to remove all the auto body repair equipment out, and that's been cleaned out and staged. So step one for the welding shop is to hire a teacher, which we did. Step two is to provide power, which will be contracted with an engineer to design this space, and so power is going to be approved and installed in step one. That'll be done, completed by June 18th. And then the air filtration systems in the booths will be installed as soon as they come in, and that should be in place in time for the welding equipment, which we're going to bring to you at another meeting to be purchased and supplied once the booths are in place and the power is available.
Okay, I'm trying to answer the people that's going to ask me all these questions. Is there a prerequisite to getting to welding? Or is it curriculum people? Brandon, do you know, I mean, do they have to take another class, or can anybody get into welding? That's what parents are going to ask me.
So one of the main things about our curriculum is that we will start out with intro level 1 classes, and so there will now be a prerequisite into level 1 classes, and our hopes is to expand that and get kids up to the level 2, 3, and 4 classes as fast as possible. So
now, is there
they'll be based off of interest.
Is there a certification that goes with this?
Yes.
So is it after how many years? 2 years or 3 years?
Is it 3?
3.
Level 3.
Okay, because that's what the parents are really excited, and nice to have a couple of answers that they can start this year and how many years they have to go to get certified, because that's a great chance to make pretty decent money.
So this would be a program that kids could get in as sophomores and work stay all 3 years, and then they could have a certificate at the end.
How many kids can be in a class at a time?
They only have 24 welders.
24 kids
That's what I
in the
counted.
program, or 24 kids per class time?
There'll be different levels of classes as it progresses.
So there will be a little bit of a blend between different levels of classes, and so the class size will be based off of safety for students, but we have.
It's hard to
the
rotate.
number of welding booths that.
Maybe that was my question, how many welding booths or?
24.
we have 8.
Yeah.
18.
24. There's 6 that exist.
There's 6 there already.
So we're adding 18 to that.
Come on.
We're adding 18.
I'll pay attention. Come on, guys.
No,
I mean,
I-
that's stuff.
I had to be reminded of it just now.
All right, any more questions on the welding booths and air filtration
Good
systems?
info.
All right, 7.09, job order for Number HEBISD 2023-001, electric upgrades to the BCTEA for welding program. Any questions on that item? All right, CSP 23-04, restroom and concession facilities at LD Bell and Trinity High Schools.
All right, the board was, had viewed conceptual drawings at the January board meeting and approved those. So a request for competitive seal proposals was drafted. We issued that to prospective vendors and held a pre-bid meeting in conjunction with it here in the boardroom here. And we had 2 responses. And did a little disappointed in the response, but that's kind of indicative of where the construction market is at the time. Not only the size of the job, but the timing of the job. So after we evaluated those 2 proposals, we asked for best and final offers from both firms, and one said that what we sent was our best and final, and the other was the one that we're presenting to you tonight is the one that adjusted theirs, but it was nowhere near what we had hoped that it would be. So what we have to present to you is a recommendation to either award this as presented or what other action you might prefer. And you're going to ask me questions about why. So we anticipated those questions. So we asked Aubrey Moses, our architect, to come here and help answer questions as to how the budget was missed on this.
So I look back at the conceptual presentation that Aubrey gave us. I don't remember what month that was, but I think last year. And the total price on that was $5.1 million for all 4. So I don't know how we ended up budgeting $4 million now when we had started out at 5.1, which is still, we missed either way. But
again, I will defer to Ms. Moses.
I didn't think to go back and look at that presentation. I had the 4 million in my head. Do you remember if that included the alternates?
It did not, because the alternates were another 850,000 on top of that. So the 4 buildings were like 1 point something each. So it came out to a total of 5.1, I believe, was the total number that you gave us back then. So that was the number I had in my head.
Total project cost?
Total project cost.
Okay, so this is construction cost.
Okay.
So that does correlate. The 4 million construction would, with all of the fees and permits and inspections and all of the other things tied to that, would increase the total project cost to around 5 million.
Yeah, but in terms of what we would have set aside in our, on this sheet, it should have been the total project cost, right? Not the construction cost. Okay, so now we're looking at a construction cost of 6.
6 something.
So that would make the total cost 8.
Roughly 8. Yeah. Correct. No alternates. That's just base bid.
Yeah.
So do we have the cost with the covers, with the canopies?
So we bid 2 different alternates for the canopies. One was a metal structure, and that came in just over 2.5 for all fields. And the fabric canopy option came in just over 1 million for all fields.
That's correct, yeah.
I still not have the covers. I would be, as many games I've been to in the summer, they bring their own tents and umbrellas, and the sun's got to be straight up to cover you. If it's at 10 o'clock or 2 o'clock, it's still coming underneath the cover. I mean, you know, if the sun's here and the cover's here, you're still in the sun, and you're going to fight about 2 people that are in the shade. You keep moving with the shade. And now people are bringing the 10 by 10 tents and putting them in the stands and staying under those and bringing umbrellas. So I'm good with not having. Now, if it's 6 to 1, I'm happy. But I just don't see it necessary because it only helps when the sun is at noon.
Yeah, so the
Noon,
first question
11
is,
to 1, you're covered. Any other time, it comes in the side.
the first question was, we were thinking a little over $1 million each when we first talked about it. Now it's about $2 million each total, all in before the awnings.
Yeah,
It's, that's the,
One of the reasons I would cut the awnings.
yeah.
I think she said it's 2.5 for all 4.
All fields included.
I wasn't talking about awnings. I'm just talking about construction costs for the buildings themselves before the awnings. So I know that I was able to talk to Josh a little bit about it, and one of the big things was concrete costs were way higher than anticipated. So I know that they've dug into it and there are specific things, but still, it's how much, how much are we willing to spend, or do we want to look at doing something a little different, or scaling down, or
So this bid here is the construction minus the awnings.
yeah, the awnings were always an add-on. So
Yeah, I just wanted to be sure I understood.
But this is construction cost, not project cost? Do we have a final number on the project cost?
We won't have that until the very end, a final number, but I can redo our estimate. Generally speaking, if you want to put 20% on it, that should more than cover the total project cost.
yeah, because the numbers that I looked at before, I kind of played with them, and it was exactly 20% is what got added on to the construction cost or the total cost. So what does that take us to? Is it 6
8.6?
And I think the question we have to decide too is, do you want us to recalculate this and bring this agenda item forward, or do we want to get a full presentation again on this information in May and have some more time to look at it? That's, because are we interested in the full costs? Again, I can get all that to you, but this is, the regular meeting is next week, and so we just have the 1 week to make that determination, if that's the board's preference.
Has anything changed on the schematic design that we saw previously?
Not much. Probably the thing I can think of the most is there is increased utility scope from the time we gave the presentation, just as we looked at the canopy designs and as we got the survey information and the underground utility information, there's just more things that had to be relocated. But nothing significant. That's the biggest thing I can think of.
Just an increase in cost. There's not much we can do about that. And the longer we wait, the more it's gonna go up.
Yeah, I'm fine keeping this for next week, but I'd like at least a package of the full universe of what we're looking at, our options with the canopies, with the metal covering, with the fabric, coupled with this new price, so we can have all the information to vote on next week.
Is that something that can be done in a week, or is it?
We can get that to you.
Okay.
Yes, that won't be a problem.
Yeah, we can get an
Projected of the cost of the project.
And this is also with the January 1 or January 31st substantial completion. So the further out we do it, the further that delays, and that may affect the competition next spring.
All right, so we'll just wait for more information. Thank you. Okay,
Did we vote on that?
no.
No,
Not until next week.
I know, but did we vote to wait till next week?
we don't have to
It's
vote
not
on
an
this.
action item.
It'll be part of consent.
Did that answer your question, Randy? Or you
Not
still?
really.
What's the question?
Oh, what if I want to say okay with this?
Well, if you're okay with this, then you can vote for it next week, because it'll be on our consent agenda. Because this is not an action item now, this is
I
just
know,
information.
I realize that.
All right. Portable walk-through metal detectors. Any questions on those?
How many is that going to be?
It's 10 sets.
Oh, there's dangerous, Dan.
This will be for 10 sets, so there are 2 units per set that are not attached. So they're open gates, what they're called. So two sets that work together to scan for high-density particular items. Low, it will ignore things like keys and cell phones and things like that that aren't considered high
And
density.
where are we using these?
We're looking at the 5 sets for Pennington Field. So it'd be 2 at the visitor and 3 sets at the home gate.
Okay.
And then 2 sets each at each of the high schools for the gymnasiums, and then 1 set for Central Junior High football and track field.
Okay, we had them at Trinity for several years, and I know you can adjust the sensitivity. And
Yes,
like you said, you can adjust it to pick up a fountain pen or a grenade. And what we ran into is they're so sensitive, when we even moved them a little bit, it messed up the sensitivity. So sometimes it went to 0, and sometimes it went where you picked up a bobby pin. Are these hopefully more progressed since I've had them in school?
Very much so. So
They're easily adjusted and taken care of, and it seemed like the more we moved them, the more the sensitivity changed.
these are made to be moved. So they're on rollers. We compared these and took them over to AEP earlier in the year when we had a trial set. And if you think of the old technology where it's boxed off, most of the time when those were moved, that top is what caused the discrepancies.
Yeah, you may have been there when we did that.
Yes, I may have. But all of these are done.
So,
A good one.
so if anybody would know, you would know.
I would know. These are done side to side, and because you can set up, all of the units can read through each
Right.
other. So when we're talking about 3 sets at the home gate, you're actually looking at 6 different towers that will all be connected. So very, very easy to move. It's got 60 different settings, and it's all ran through computer and through your mobile phone. It can be adjusted on the spot.
So,
I went to a track meet at Central.
Yes, sir.
Stands were full. Around all the fencing you couldn't see. Probably 2,500 people there. Will they be used at the track meets?
They will be used at the track meets. That was the request from the athletic department. So
Okay.
we have not had issues at the track meets, but we did have some issues at some of the junior high football games.
Yes, I was
But
at a
I have been
couple.
told that the track meets have even 2 or 3 as much people there.
Yes,
So, yeah.
pretty crowded. Okay, I'm good.
does it
Thank
take
you.
one person per station to observe?
It does not. It really just takes 2 people on either side. And the way we looked with the athletic department, and I sat down with Mr. Johnson, and we looked at what it would look like at each of the facilities. So coaches, teachers, whoever we want to get trained, it's a very easy 20-minute training. The company comes out and does it.
When we went to Indianapolis, at one of the concert halls that we went into, they had this equipment. So because I knew we were talking about it, I kind of stood behind the guy as he was watching people come through. And it was pretty interesting because it kind of was an immediate scan, and anything that was dense kind of showed up as a black blob. And he would stop, and he kind of knew on what part of their person it was because he could see it on the screen. And you know, he could immediately say, yeah, it's a problem, or no, it's not a problem. And I didn't see him find any problems, but I mean, any backpack, anything, I mean, it just immediately would show up as it would locate on the person exactly what they were seeing and where it was and what they needed to check. So
The technology is changing so fast that when we were looking at these in October, the chips have upgraded twice since then on how they're being worked. So.
Okay. Any other questions?
No, thank you, Dan.
I've got a question. Dan, when we talked about this in November, we talked about using it for special events.
Yes, sir.
Particularly at Pennington. I think having them at the high schools is new to the conversation. Do we anticipate leaving them up permanently at the high schools, or are they pulled out at the high schools for special events?
They're pulled out for special events.
Only
They're very, very easy to move. They're about 20 pounds, and they have a handle and wheels, so they can be moved incredibly easily into a closet and pulled out.
Okay, so we're thinking about using them in the gymnasiums at the high schools, but only during special events?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
They won't be accessible to the students.
Very good.
All right. CSP 22-08, HEBISD Summer 2023 Large Kitchen Equipment. Any questions on those items? Thank you. Purchase of pre-garden playground equipment at 4 campuses. Any questions on the pre-kindergarten playgrounds?
I'd like to hear that. So Josh, help me. When we met in November, the money that we had allocated was about $1 million, just over $1 million to do all of the campuses. This is 4 campuses. Talk to me about the plan to do these in phases, and just talk to me about the plan, and then I might have some questions for you.
Okay. So we got 4, but keep in mind too, we got a 5th one, putting that one in at Bel Air under the construction. One of the concerns was the scale of economy, being able to do, can we do 4, how many of those we could do at one time? And so what we've identified right now, excuse me, was Trinity Lakes, River Trails, Arbor Creek, Oakwood Terrace. Those are new campuses, and those are programs that are growing, and we wanted to start with those first. I'd like to, if you mind, you've heard me say bullets before cannonballs. I'd like to get this down with these 4 campuses, and we can escalate after that.
Okay.
So
what is our role as far as installation?
We're basically observing a contractor to be able to install those.
Okay.
And then we also help facilitate any type of coordination or anything with the campus to make sure that this doesn't have an impact or impede on the school.
Okay. Do any of these campuses currently have something for pre-K that needs to be removed?
No. Arbor Creek, Trinity Lakes, River Trails, no.
Okay. What is the timeline to do the rest of them?
For the rest of the district? How much money you want to give me? And
Well, I mean, this we talked about $1 million in November. I think the board was ready to do that.
Okay.
I don't know why we're not doing that.
just again, let's get these under our belt, make sure we get the right way. We also had to get the specifications correct, so we've got those. Get them to these 4 campuses, and then after that, we can go full bore on the rest of them.
Okay. If it works, let's not waste any time.
Okay.
So you're kind of looking at this as like a beta test, like to make sure that you know how to do this appropriately and quickly and in the time frame, and then you'll move forward?
Yes, that's how I've met with the camps of the elementary committees, made sure first we want to make sure that this was the equipment that would work best. That cleared that, so we move forward. And these are the ones that we've spec'd out. So I want to get those down, and then I'd really like to go after all of them.
Okay, good.
Okay.
I just have one more question about the campuses that were chosen. So you indicated that they were the new schools and that they were growing, but did it have any? Were there any other deciding factors in those? It worries me a little that they're all the new schools. I'm not going to lie.
Okay.
Numbers in the program. Okay.
All right, any further questions?
Are we worried at all the price is going to jump up on us if we don't move quicker?
Well, kind of throw back to our other conversation about the concession stands. One thing that Aubrey and I was talking about is we're getting rumors of the only thing on this that would probably have an escalation would be concrete. You're talking the border around the outside edge. And so concrete is, you go week to week. Is it going to be electrical? Is it going to be concrete? Is it going to be diesel? This week, it's concrete is the potential for escalation.
Okay. And 3 to 4 month delivery from today?
I believe so. Well, we get them scheduled and then from approval, yeah.
All right, any additional questions? Okay, purchase of backhoe for maintenance and operations department use. Any questions on that?
That's exciting.
It actually is.
I see you, Josh. I see you.
I'm trying to hold my, be professional and keep the candor down.
Yeah, he's gonna jump up and down after.
I told him I'm taking the bag off the seat and I'm driving it first.
All right, purchase of restroom positions for partitions for 2 campuses. Any questions on that?
Why these 2 campuses?
Of the ones, these are the top 2, and then one, there's more under that. So just how we ranked them out.
What is our need at the other campuses? 'Cause I know these are in very bad shape.
We've been replacing, basically, we had
Campuses that
partition
are in
material.
Bad shape?
Yes. I'm trying to think how you would say this. I can walk into a building, I can tell you where the smallest grades are, because these are starting to rust out. They have material on them that they need to be removed. Yes.
I mean, this is not a large expenditure, but, you know, looking at it for projecting it across all of our elementary schools, it becomes a large expenditure. I'd like to have some idea of what we're looking at as far as the real need, and when we're gonna implement it.
Okay.
You know, these are in such bad shape that I don't want others to get to this
Agreed.
situation.
So on some of the, we've been working with materials and doing the installs ourselves over the past number of years. High schools to elementaries, trying to take out the worst, and we're just trying to chip away at that list as we're going down. I can easily bring in the rest of the rank and be able to show that to you if that would be what you're needing.
It'd be nice to know.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, any,
Another item on that needs to be corrected. The budget code that was, or the fund source was incorrectly identified as the locally defined capital outlay project fund. It's actually going to be out of the maintenance and operations budget. We'll get that corrected.
all right, any other questions on the restroom partitions? All right, revision to board policy CY local intellectual property. Ms. Tuttle?
All right, so we did a policy review session and of course updated several policies, and this was one of the policies we did quite a bit of work on. But we are a continuous improvement district, and one of the things that when we shared this with the individuals closest to this work, which would be individuals who do a lot of work with writing of curriculum, things of that nature, there were questions that we felt deserved some clarification. So we worked over the last several months with our attorneys and TASB to provide that clarification. And so what I'll call your attention to is we've outlined in the first section what defines district ownership, but then what we've also done based on some great questions and feedback is we've looked at existing work that an employee has already created prior to becoming an employee and making sure that there's no confusion that we're claiming that work as our own. Now, if it is modified and utilized and made better, you know, through a district process, then that would be intellectual property. But we also want to make sure that we're clear that if someone creates work prior to coming to us and allows us to utilize that just because they were an employee, that doesn't mean that it cannot go with them as their work when they leave. So the purpose of these revisions is to further clarify and make sure that we are being equitable on both sides of the intellectual property coin. Any questions? Yes, Fred?
So Cicely, as a simpleton here, and I got a bunch of questions about this from teachers during COVID, so I just want to make sure I understand this correctly. I'm a science teacher and I record some YouTube videos that are good for my classroom. The district has the right to reuse and reappropriate those after my time here at HEB-ISD is over, correct?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Any other questions on this policy? All right, revisions to board policy FNCE local.
Very simple. In aligning this policy to our actual practice, we needed to change the word shall to the word may.
Any questions on that policy change? All right, thank you, Ms. Tuttle. We are ready for action items. 8.01, consider approval of updated notice of general election, May 6, 2023. Mr. Williams.
Okay, if you recall at the March 27th meeting, we brought this forward to the board and the board approved it. That following Friday, the Tarrant County Election Office decided to add another election polling place, which is indicated on your list as number 14. So therefore, we are bringing it back to be reapproved. So they don't typically add something that late, but they did this time. So.
Any questions on this action item? I will accept the motion.
I move that the board approve the updated notice of general election on May 6, 2023, to elect Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District Board of Trustees for places 1, 6, and 7.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the updated notice of general election on May 6, 2023 to elect Hurst-Euless-Bedford Independent School District Board of Trustees for place 1, 6, and 7. Please vote. And that motion passes. All right, 8.02, consider approval of delegate authority to board president to enter into contract discussed in closed session. Mr. Kerbo?
Well, as is stated before every board meeting, the board has the Open Meetings Act allows the board to discuss matters and certain matters in closed session. Among those is the consideration of the sale, exchange, value of real estate. And that's an item that has been discussed or will be discussed in closed session shortly. This resolution will authorize Mr. Romero to act on behalf of the board and delegate its full authority to execute a contract for any consideration.
All right, are there any questions on the motion itself? Then I'll accept the motion.
I move the board approve the delegation of authority to the board president to enter into a contract for the property discussed in closed session.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve delegation of authority to the board president to enter into a contract for the property discussed in closed session. Please vote. And that motion passes. All right, consider approval of donations for the April regular board meeting presentation of certificates of appreciation.
I move that the board approve the April 2023 donations as presented.
Second.
I have a motion and a second for the board to approve the April 2023 donations as presented. Please vote. And that motion passes. All right, other business. Opportunity for board members to request items be placed on future board agenda. Anybody have anything? All right, 9.02, review of board activity chart. I'm sorry, I haven't seen it. You still have the board activity chart? All right, we'll pass it around.
You get a little grace time.
Okay, yeah. Let's see, board, 9.03, discuss board goal number 3, advocacy. Don Jordan Wells and Fred Campos.
Does anyone have any updates to what we requested the last time?
Yes, I have an update. I am in the process of scheduling a meeting with Pat Hardy from the State Board of Education. And that's going to happen before the end of May.
Thank you, Julie. Anybody else?
Fred and I also need to schedule with Kelly Hancock, and we've traded calendars. We just haven't found a time that we could do, so we're working on it. I've got my little note right there.
I also had multiple email and phone exchanges with several of our senators and House of Representatives over the last couple of weeks.
Cool. And as a reminder, when you do have your meetings, please do update the board activity chart with such meetings. And for anyone else who, just as a reminder, make sure you touch base with your mate, your buddy, to get those meetings scheduled and held. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Don. All right, next we're gonna do plus deltas for the extra mile reception.
Okay, I like coming over here. So we're going to do a plus delta for extra mile. If you could take out your sticky notes, and then I'll come around like we did last time. I'll get them from you. I'll put them onto the board, and then we'll go through them. So again, extra mile, that was over at LD Bell. We only have a couple, so let me, we have a plus, great participation in most of the categories. We had an increase of, I think, well, we increased 2 categories, and then total people acknowledged was, I think, 30 more than the previous year, so that was really good. Not at the Bell Auditorium, not. Oh, okay, yeah, people leaving, too spread out. We outgrew, remember that meeting was scheduled for the Buinger, and as we got, our numbers were so big, we couldn't do it at the Buinger, so the question is, could we do Pat May? So we'll look at that as a possible venue. More participation in the smaller areas, yeah, the SROs, we only had 2 SROs nominated, and the crossing guard nominations were pretty small, so I think we need to do a little better job of advertising that. Those are brand new categories, so, you know, as somebody's did not win, I hope they become competitive. And then just since nobody said anything, any comments, we had food, any concerns on the food? I thought that actually was pretty good.
The food was good, yeah.
That was a lot of variety and a lot of
Child
food.
nutrition did a great job.
They did a good job. All right, thank you very much.
All right, open forum number 2? Nothing. All right, we don't need a second closed session, correct? All right, then I will accept the motion to adjourn.
So moved.
We are adjourned. See everybody at employee banquet.
Are the three of us riding together on Wednesday?
Yes, I will drive.
So can we be there by 5:30? Just